Sylvester Stallone built one of the most valuable characters in the history of movies, and he doesn't own a piece of it. Not the sequels, not the spin-offs, not the merchandise or the streaming deals, or the statue tourists still line up to photograph. Rocky Balboa turned a broke, unknown actor into one of the highest-paid stars on the planet, and somehow the man who wrote him, played him, and became him never held a single share of the character itself. That contradiction is the whole story, because underneath the estimated $400 million fortune, there are really just two decisions that matter. One made Stallone rich. The other may have cost his family a piece of his greatest legacy forever. Long before the mansions and the watch collections, Stallone was the actor nobody in Hollywood wanted. He didn't look the way leading men were supposed to look. He didn't sound the way leading men were supposed to sound. He auditioned and he got rejected. He auditioned again and he got rejected again. At one point, he tried to land a background role in The Godfather, just a face lost in a crowd during a party scene. And even that was a no. At some point, Stallone stopped waiting for Hollywood to see his value. He decided to write it himself. He'd watched a journeyman boxer named Chuck Wepner go the distance against Muhammad Ali, lasting far longer than anyone expected. That image stuck with him, an underdog who wasn't supposed to survive the fight, surviving it anyway. Stallone sat down and wrote the first Rocky screenplay in roughly 3.5 days, but the genius of it was never really the boxing. Rocky was a story about someone the world had already written off, trying to prove the world wrong. In a way, Stallone was writing his own life onto the page. The script got attention fast. Producers reportedly offered him as much as $360,000 for it, a life-changing number for a man who, by his own account, was nearly broke at the time. It could have solved everything overnight. There was just one catch. They didn't want Stallone in it. They wanted the script, not the writer. Cast a real star and send the unknown back to wherever he came from. So Stallone made a decision that, on paper, looked insane. He turned down the guaranteed money. He said the only way they were getting the script was if he played Rocky himself. He had no savings to speak of, no leverage, no proven track record, and he walked away from a fortune anyway, betting that the words weren't worth anything without him standing behind them. Eventually, the producers gave an but only on a shoestring budget of about $1 million. Rocky went on to make roughly $225 million worldwide. It picked up 10 Oscar nominations and won 3, including Best Picture. Almost overnight, the actor Hollywood kept turning away became one of the most recognizable faces on earth. Stallone's upfront paycheck was modest by later standards, but he'd also negotiated a cut of the film's success, and by his own estimate, his total take from that first film eventually landed around $2.5 million. Extraordinary for a career that barely existed a year earlier. But the real payoff was never the check. It was the leverage. Before Rocky, Stallone had to beg his way into the room. After Rocky, the room needed him, and he used that leverage well. Rocky became a sequel, then another, then another. With each one, Stallone wasn't just showing up to act. He was writing, directing, producing, shaping the entire franchise around himself. By the time Rocky IV rolled around, reports placed his pay for writing, directing, and starring in the film at somewhere around $12 million, with the chance to earn even more from its box office. That put him among the highest-paid performers alive, a staggering distance from the man who'd once been offered a check to disappear from his own screenplay. And Rocky was only half of it. Then came John Rambo. First Blood introduced a very different kind of Stallone character, a traumatized veteran whose strength barely covered the damage underneath. The sequels turned Rambo into a global action icon in his own right. For a stretch of the 80s and 90s, Stallone was carrying 2 separate franchises at once, both built around characters the public simply could not picture as anyone but him. That combination gave him enormous box office pull. In 1994, Savoy Pictures reportedly signed him to a $20 million deal for a single feature film, with the possibility of even more, depending on how it performed. Studios weren't just paying for an actor anymore. They were paying for access to an audience that belonged to him. Stallone kept finding new ways to turn recognition into income. When his box office cooled in the 90s, he didn't fight the idea of aging action stars. He built a franchise around it. The Expendables gathered a cast of names that had spent decades building their own legends and sold audiences on exactly that. Legacy, nostalgia, and star power, repackaged as something new. He also knew when to go back to what already worked. After a string of films that failed to reignite his earlier dominance, he returned to the character that made him in 2006 with Rocky Balboa, made on a tight budget and a commercial hit. Then came Creed, which introduced Rocky to a whole new generation. This time not as the fighter climbing the steps, but as the aging mentor helping someone else climb them. It earned Stallone another Oscar nomination and proved that a character built well enough can keep generating opportunities long after television looks finished. For the first season of Tulsa King, Stallone reportedly earned around $750,000 per episode. By the second season, that number had climbed to roughly $1.5 million per episode. Proof that decades of movie star recognition could still command a premium, even in the streaming era. Stallone's money didn't only come from performances, though. He became an original celebrity partner and stockholder in Planet Hollywood, standing alongside names like Bruce Willis and Arnold Schwarzenegger, turning restaurants into destinations built on movie memorabilia and celebrity ownership. For a while, it was one of the most visible celebrity-backed businesses of the 90s. But attention isn't the same thing as profitability. The company expanded fast, ran into serious financial trouble, and ended up in bankruptcy proceedings. It was a lesson Stallone would carry forward. A famous name can pull people through the door, but it can't fix weak economics once they're inside. Later in his career, he moved further into the production side of the business by forming Balboa Productions, giving himself a structure to develop projects instead of waiting for a studio to hand him a script. In 2023, Balboa Productions signed a first-look deal with Amazon Studios, later renewed under a multi-year agreement with Amazon MGM Studios. It's a telling shift. The younger Stallone fought for the right to be in one film. The older Stallone built a company capable of generating many, a pipeline that keeps producing, whether or not he's the one standing in front of the camera. His lifestyle tells the same story of scale. In 2020, Stallone and his wife bought a waterfront estate in Palm Beach for roughly $35 million, more than 13,000 square feet of living space, with about 250 feet of water frontage. Before that, he'd spent decades in a sprawling estate in Beverly Park, Los Angeles, originally listed for $110 million and eventually sold to Adele for $58 million. One detail from that sale says more about Stallone's legacy than almost anything else. He said Adele wanted the giant Rocky statue on the property to stay as part of the deal. Think about that for a second. A character Stallone doesn't legally own was so woven into his identity that a replica of it reportedly factored into the sale of a $58 million home. Rocky had stopped being just a movie character. He'd become part of the architecture of Stallone's actual life. Stallone has also poured money into art, and especially watches. In 2024, Sotheby's auctioned 11 pieces from his personal collection for a combined $6.7 million. The standout was a rare Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, which he'd reportedly bought for around $2.2 million back in 2021. It sold for $5.4 million. On the surface, that looks like an incredible return, but it comes with a warning attached. Most luxury purchases are expenses, not investments. This watch worked because it was exceptionally rare, hard to acquire, and tied to a famous name. It's not a signal that any expensive watch, or car, or collectible is guaranteed to appreciate. The lesson isn't to copy the purchase, it's to understand why that particular asset held its value. Scarcity, provenance, demand, and access, not the price tag alone. Which brings us back to the one decision that still seems to bother Stallone more than any flop or failed investment, the ownership of Rocky. To be clear, he wasn't shut out entirely. Stallone has said he received payments, profit participation, and real financial benefits from the franchise over the decades. He didn't walk away with nothing. Rocky made him famous, gave him leverage, and helped build his fortune. But he's also said plainly that he owns zero equity in the character. And he's spoken about the frustration of not being able to pass any piece of that ownership on to his children. That's the moment this stops being a contract story and becomes a legacy story. A salary supports your life while you're living it. Ownership keeps supporting the people you love after you're gone. Stallone's mistake was never that he accepted too little money along the way. It was failing to grab hold of the one thing that would keep paying out long after the camera stopped: the character's future. Every sequel, every spin-off, the television rights, the licensing, the merchandise, the new actors playing old roles in films made decades after the original deal was signed. Stallone kept his creative voice and his financial cut, but never the permanent control that would have made Rocky a family asset instead of just a career. Which makes Rocky both the smartest and the most costly decision of his life at the exact same time. Refusing to sell the script unless he could star in it is what built his entire career. Not fighting for ownership of what he built is what limited how much of that empire he ever truly controlled. And that gap between those two decisions is really the lesson underneath all of it. Betting on yourself is what creates the opportunity. Protecting what you create is what turns that opportunity into something lasting. Most of us will never own a movie franchise. But the question underneath Stallone's story applies to almost anyone building something with their time. When you work, are you only collecting a paycheck, or are you gaining equity? Are you building something that can eventually run without you, or intellectual property that keeps paying you long after the work is done? Are you developing skills that raise your future bargaining power, or are you simply helping someone else build an asset they'll own forever? A bigger income can make your life more comfortable right now. Ownership is what changes the relationship between your time and your money for good. And Stallone's story proves something else worth remembering. A one imperfect deal doesn't have to define your entire financial future. He kept writing, he kept producing, he built new franchises when the old ones cooled off, and returned to old characters at exactly the right moments to bring them back to life. He moved into television when his film career needed a new stage. He built Balboa Productions to control his own pipeline. Again and again, he found new ways to turn recognition into leverage. Public estimates put Sylvester Stallone's net worth at around $400 million today, though no fully audited figure has ever been made public. But the number was never really the point of this story. The real story is that Stallone built a fortune by refusing to let anyone else decide his worth, and then spent the next several decades learning that worth has to be protected by more than just confidence. It has to be protected with contracts, with equity, with control, with ownership. Stallone created a character who taught the world how to keep getting back up. His own financial life teaches something just as important. Winning the opportunity is only the first fight. The second fight is making sure you actually own a piece of what happens after you win. If Stallone's financial journey changed the way you think about success, you know what to do. Like the video and subscribe to Net Worth Decode, because with every famous fortune, the headline number is almost never the most interesting part of the story.